Introduction: the power that whispers. What if the strongest thing you could do isn't to fight harder, push longer, or shout louder, but to simply say, enough? Imagine a moment where everything's crashing around you. Stress piling up, people demanding more than you can give, your own mind spinning out of control, and instead of breaking, you find a quiet strength that stops the chaos dead in its tracks. That's not weakness. That's power. Real power. The kind the ancient Stoics mastered centuries, ego and the kind we're going to unpack today. Welcome to a story about a regular guy named Jack, who learned that saying enough isn't giving up, it's taking control. Stick around because this one's going to hit home. The storm. Before the calm, Jack was the guy everyone leaned on. At 34, he had a decent job as a project manager in a mid-sized tech firm in Austin, Texas. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't broke either, just comfortable enough to keep the bills paid and the fridge stocked. He had a wife, Sarah, who worked part-time as a nurse, and a 5-year-old daughter, Lily, who thought her dad could fix anything. And for a while, Jack believed he could too. But lately, life felt like a treadmill stuck on max speed. At work, his boss kept piling on deadlines, new projects. Last-minute fixes, Jack, you're the only one I trust with this. At home, Sarah was picking up extra shifts, leaving Jack to handle dinner, bath time, and Lily's endless questions about why the moon doesn't fall out of the sky. Then there were the little things. The leaky faucet he kept meaning to fix, the neighbor who borrowed his lawnmower and never returned it, the friend who called at midnight to vent about his divorce. Jack said yes to it all. He had to. That's what good guys do, right? Except Jack wasn't feeling good anymore. He was tired, bone deep tired. His mornings started with 3 cups of coffee just to fake being awake. His temper flared over nothing snapping, at Lily for spilling juice, brushing off Sarah when she asked how his day was. At night, he'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with everything he hadn't done and everything he still had to do. He wasn't living, he was surviving. Barely. One Tuesday, it all came to a head. Jack was in a meeting, half listening to his boss drone on about a new client when his phone buzzed. It was Sarah. "Lily's sick. Can you pick her up from school? I'm stuck at the hospital." Jack nodded to himself, already mentally rearranging his day. Then his boss dropped a bombshell. "Jack, I need that report by 5 p.m. today. No excuses." Jack's stomach twisted. He couldn't say no, his team was already stretched thin and he'd promised to pull his weight. But Lily needed him too. He stumbled through the day in a haze. He picked up Lily, her little face flushed with fever, and brought her home. He typed one-handed on his laptop while holding a cold cloth to her forehead, ignoring the headache pounding behind his eyes. By 4:55 p.m., he hit send on the report, sloppy, but done. By 6 p.m., Lily was asleep, and Sarah was still at work. Jack sat on the couch, staring at a blank TV screen, feeling like he'd run a marathon and lost anyway. That's when he heard it, a whisper in his head so quiet he almost missed it. Enough. The first step, what the Stoics knew. Jack didn't know it yet, but that whisper was the start of something big. See, the Stoics, those wise old philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus had a secret weapon. They understood what's in your control and what isn't. They didn't waste energy fighting the weather or other people's choices. They focused on their own actions, their own reactions, and when life got too heavy, they didn't just grit their teeth and push through. They asked, "Is this mine to carry?" Jack wasn't a philosopher. He wasn't even much of a reader. But that night, something clicked. He grabbed his phone and Googled how to stop feeling overwhelmed. A random article popped up about Stoicism, something about Marcus Aurelius saying, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Jack read it twice. Then he sat back, letting it sink in. What if he didn't have to fix everything? What if saying enough wasn't quitting, but choosing? The next morning, Jack woke up late 7:30 a.m. No alarm. Lily was still sleeping off her fever and Sarah had crashed after her shift. For once, Jack didn't panic. He made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and thought about that word, enough. He wasn't sure what it meant yet, but he knew he needed to find out. Testing the waters, Jack decided to try something. Nothing grand, just a small experiment. At work, he'd say enough to one thing. Not out loud, he wasn't ready to look crazy, but in his head. He'd pick one task, one request, and let it go. No guilt, no second guessing, just a quiet, "That's enough for now." That Wednesday it happened. His boss, Mike, swung by his desk at 10 a.m. "Jack, can you jump on a call with the new client this afternoon? They're antsy, and you're good with people." Jack's instinct was to nod, to say, "Sure, I'll make it work." But then he remembered Lily's fever yesterday, the half-finished report, the way his hands shook from too much coffee. He took a breath. "Mike, I'd love to help, but I'm swamped with the quarterly review today. Can someone else take it?" Mike blinked, surprised. Jack never said no. Yeah, I guess I can ask Tara. You okay, man?" "Yeah," Jack said, forcing a smile. "Just pacing myself." Mike shrugged and walked off. Jack waited for the guilt to hit the voice in his head that'd call him lazy or selfish. It didn't come. Instead, he felt lighter, like he'd dropped a bag of bricks he didn't even know he was carrying. He finished the quarterly review by 3 p.m., picked up Lily from school, and even had time to read her a story before dinner. That night, he told Sarah about it. She was stirring spaghetti sauce, half listening when she grinned. "You said no? To Mike? I'm proud of you, babe. You're always running yourself ragged." Jack laughed, a little embarrassed. But she was right. He'd been running on empty for months, maybe years. Saying enough didn't fix everything, but it cracked open a door he hadn't seen before. Digging deeper. Seneca's lesson. Jack started digging into Stoicism, not heavy books, just snippets he found online. One quote stuck with him, from Seneca. "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult." Jack chewed on that. He'd always thought life was hard because, well, it just was. Bill's kids, work, it's what adults deal with. But what if he was making it harder by not daring to set limits? He thought about his dad, a mechanic who worked 12-hour days until his back gave out. "You do what you gotta do," he'd say. Jack grew up believing that meant saying yes to everything, no matter the cost. But the Stoics, they'd call that nonsense. Epictetus once wrote, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears," meaning, life's tough enough without you adding extra weight. Jack started small. He said, "Enough," to checking work emails after 7 p.m. He said, "Enough," to fixing the neighbor's lawnmower, drama politely returning it with a, "Sorry, man, I'm out of time." Each time, it got easier. Not because the world stopped asking, but because he stopped feeling like he owed it everything. The storm returns. For a couple of weeks, Jack rode the high of his little experiment. Saying enough felt like a superpower, quiet, sure, but real. He wasn't turning into some lazy bum. He was just picking his battles. Work got done, Lily got her bedtime stories, and Sarah noticed he wasn't snapping over spilled juice anymore. Life wasn't perfect, but it was manageable. Then came Friday. Jack's boss, Mike, called an emergency meeting at 4 p.m. The room was tense, half the team fidgeting, the other half scrolling their phones under the table. Mike paced, his tie loose. "The client's pulling out," he said. "They're not happy with the last update. We've got till Monday to fix it or we lose the account. I need all hands on deck this weekend." Jack's stomach dropped. He'd promised Lily he'd take her to the park Saturday, her first big girl bike ride without training wheels. Sarah was working a double shift, so it was on him. He pictured Lily's face, all lit up with that gap-toothed grin saying, "Daddy, you promised." But then he saw Mike's eyes land on him, expectant. Jack was the fixer, the guy who always said yes. "I know it's short notice," Mike went on, "but this is make or break. Jack, can you lead the rework?" The old Jack would have nodded without a second thought. Duty first, right? But the new Jack, the one who'd tasted enough, hesitated. He felt the tug of war inside. The guilt of letting his team down versus the ache of breaking a promise to his kid. He took a breath, slow and deliberate, like he'd read Marcus Aurelius did when the world got loud. "Mike," he said, voice steady, "I can't do the whole weekend. I've got a family thing Saturday. I'll give you Sunday all day, and I'll prep what I can tonight. Can Tara or someone cover tomorrow?" The room went quiet. Mike's jaw tightened, then relaxed. "Fine, Sunday works. Tara, you're on for Saturday." Tara shot Jack a look, half annoyed, half impressed, but nodded. Meeting over, Jack grabbed his bag and headed home, heart pounding. He'd said enough to a whole weekend of chaos, and he hadn't caved. The park and the pause. Saturday morning, Jack woke up to Lily bouncing on his bed. Bike day," she chanted. He grinned, still groggy, and hauled himself up. At the park, the air was crisp, the kind of Texas spring day that makes you forget summer's coming to roast you. Lily wobbled on her bike, giggling every time she tipped, and Jack jogged alongside, steadying her when she needed it. No emails, no deadlines. Just this, his kid, the son. A scraped knee he kissed better. Later, they sat on a bench with ice cream chocolate for her, vanilla for him. Lily chattered about how she'd ride to the moon someday, and Jack just listened. Really listened. Not half there. Nodding while his mind churned over work. He felt something settle in his chest, a quiet he hadn't known he'd lost. That's when it hit him. Enough wasn't just about saying no to the bad stuff. It was about saying yes to this moments that mattered. The Stoics got that. Epictetus had a line Jack found online. "There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will." Jack couldn't control the client's tantrum or Mike's demands. But he could control his being here now with Lily. Sunday's reckoning Sunday, Jack was back in the grind. He dropped Lily at a friend's house and hit the office by 8 a.m. The team was bleary-eyed but focused, hammering out code fixes and presentation slides. Jack led with a calm he didn't expect. He wasn't frazzled, wasn't barking orders. He'd had his enough moment yesterday, and it carried over. By 6 p.m., they had a solid draft for Monday's pitch. Mike clapped him on the shoulder. "Good work, man. You pulled it off." Jack drove home, windows down, letting the night air clear his head. He'd done his part, no more, no less. The Stoics called it apatheia, not apathy like we think, but freedom from being tossed around by every emotion or demand. He wasn't perfect at it, but he was starting to get it. A deeper dive, Marcus Aurelius speaks. That night, Jack scrolled through more Stoic stuff on his phone. He landed on Marcus Aurelius again. Meditations, Book 2. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this, you have the power to revoke at any moment. Jack read it slow, letting it sink in. He thought about Friday's meeting. The distress wasn't the client pulling out or Mike's pressure. It was Jack's old habit of thinking he had to carry it all. Saying enough didn't change the situation. It changed him. He wasn't running from responsibility. He was redefining it. Marcus, a Roman emperor with armies and empires to manage, still found time to write that. If he could say enough to pointless worry, Jack could say it to a weekend of overtime. The shift spreads. Jack's experiment started rippling. At work, he kept setting limit, small ones like skipping pointless meetings or delegating tasks he used to hoard. His team noticed. Tara even pulled him aside one day. "You're different lately, less stressed. What's up?" Jack shrugged, not ready to preach Stoicism, but said, "Just figuring out what's worth my time." She nodded, thoughtful, like maybe she'd try it too. At home, it spread too. Sarah caught him saying enough to fixing that damn faucet for the 3rd time. "I'll call a plumber," he said, and she laughed. "Who are you? And what did you do with my husband?" But she liked it, like that he wasn't stretched thin, that he was present. One night, they even sat on the porch after Lily was asleep, sharing a beer, talking like they hadn't in months. Jack wasn't some stoic sage yet. He still got mad when traffic clogged I-35, still worried about bills. But enough was a lifeline. It pulled him back when he started drowning. The next challenge looms. Then came the real test. Mike called Jack into his office a week later. "Corporate's pushing for promotions," he said. You're on the shortlist senior manager. More pay, more responsibility. You in? Jack froze. More pay sounded good. Lily's school fees were creeping up, and the house needed repairs. But more responsibility? Longer hours? More stress? Less of those park days with Lily? He told Mike he'd think about it. That night he sat at the kitchen table staring at a notepad. Pros, money, status, cons, time, sanity. He thought about Seneca again. You live as if you were destined to live forever. You squander time as if you drew from a full and abundant supply. Was this promotion worth trading more of his life for? Or was enough calling him again? Here's the final segment of the quiet strength of saying enough for your YouTube channel, the Daily Stoic Mindset. This part will bring Jack's journey to a satisfying close, weave in more Stoic wisdom, and end with a concise, engaging plug for your channel. I'll aim to push the total word count to around 5,000 words, keeping the tone approachable and the content coherent. Let's finish strong. Weighing the scales, Jack spent the next few days wrestling with Mike's offer. Senior manager. More money, more Cluton paper. It was a no-brainer. He could see it. A bigger paycheck, a nicer car, maybe even a vacation that wasn't just camping at Lake Travis. But every time he pictured it, he also saw the cost later nights. More calls, less of Lily's chatter filling his evenings. He'd fought so hard to find that quiet strength, that enough. Was he about to throw it away? He grabbed a beer from the fridge and sat on the back porch, the hum of cicadas filling the air. Sarah was inside, reading to Lily. Jack pulled up his phone and scrolled back to that Seneca quote. You live as if you were destined to live forever. You squander time as if you drew from a full and abundant supply. It stung. Time wasn't infinite. Lily wouldn't be 5 forever. Sarah wouldn't always be there to split a beer with. Work would always ask for more, but how much was he willing to give? He thought about Marcus Aurelius too. The guy ran an empire, dealt with wars and plagues, yet wrote, "Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking." Jack didn't need a title to feel steady. He'd already started finding that within saying. Enough had given him more than any promotion could. The next morning he walked into Mike's office. "I've thought about it," Jack said, standing straighter than he felt. "I'm flattered, really, but I'm good where I am. I can't take on more right now." Mike raised an eyebrow. "You sure? This doesn't come around often." "I know," Jack said. "But I've got enough on my plate. I'll keep doing my best here, though." Mike nodded, a little puzzled, but didn't push. "All right. Door's open if you change your mind." Jack walked out, half expecting regret to hit. It didn't. Instead, he felt solid, like he'd planted his feet and the ground held. The new normal life didn't magically get easy after that. The faucet still leaked until the plumber came. Lily still got sick sometimes and work still threw curveballs. But Jack had changed. Enough wasn't just a word anymore, it was a lens. He started asking himself, what's mine to control? Straight, out of Epictetus's playbook. Traffic on I-35, not his. Mike's mood, not his. His own effort, his own choices, those were his. He kept digging into Stoicism too, not as some scholar, but as a guy trying to live better. He found a line from Seneca that stuck. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. How many nights had he lost worrying about things that never happened? Now when his mind started spinning, what if the client bails again? What if Lily's school costs double? He'd catch himself. Enough, he'd think. Deal with it when it's real. Sarah noticed the shift. One evening as they washed dishes together, she bumped his shoulder. You're calmer these days. I like it. Jack smiled, handing her a plate. Trying to be. Less yelling at the world in my head. She laughed, and it felt like a win. Lily picked up on it too. One Saturday, as they built a lopsided sand castle at the park, she said, Daddy, you're not grumpy anymore. Jack ruffled her hair. Working on it, kiddo. The quiet strength weeks turned into months, and Jack's enough became a quiet strength. It wasn't loud or flashy, no one at work threw him a parade for turning down the promotion. But it was there, steady, like a river carving its way through rock. He still worked hard, still loved his family, still fixed what he could. But he stopped carrying what wasn't his. One night, he sat down with a cheap notebook and jotted something he'd read from Marcus Aurelius. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Below it, he wrote his own version. Enough is my strength. It's not running away, it's standing still. He wasn't sure if it made sense to anyone else, but it did to him. That same night, he looked out at the Austin skyline from his porch lights, twinkling, life humming along. He didn't have it all figured out. He'd stumble again, lose his temper, take on too much. But he had a tool now, a Stoic trick that had been there all along, the power to say enough and mean it. And that's Jack's story, a regular guy who found a not-so-regular strength in a single word. If this hit you where it counts, stick around. I'm your name, and this is the Daily Stoic Mindset, where we break down Stoic wisdom for real life, American style. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell, and join us next time for more stories about keeping your cool in a world that won't stop spinning. What's your enough? Let's figure it out together. See you soon.